All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar, Holding Government Accountable in California by Exposing Inappropriate Use of Taxpayer Funds. I'm Carl DeMaio, and today I'm wearing the hat of a senior fellow with the Transparency Foundation. You can learn more about the foundation online at thetransparencyfoundation.org. If you could go to the next slide. If you want to ask questions during the presentation, you can click on the raise hand feature and we will put you into queue. We will call on you at the end of the presentation. We're going to do all the questions at the end. So if you have a question as we're going through and you don't want to forget it, you can type the question into the Q&A box. And then, of course, also remember, if you're on the phone, you hit *9 to raise your hand. When you hear a tone, we will call upon you to speak. Any questions that are not answered, please follow up with us online at info@thetransparencyfoundation.org or go to our website, thetransparencyfoundation.org, and click under Contact. Let's start up about the foundation. We are a 501c3 organization, nonprofit, nonpartisan, and our mission is to shine a light on public institutions, which typically is government, but public institutions, to make them more transparent and accountable to the people that they serve. We do not take any government money, no government contracts, no government grants. We don't believe that we can be an effective watchdog of government and public institutions if we're taking funding from them. So that is an internal policy that we've adopted to eliminate any conflicts of interest. We also are funded by small dollar donors. We have an independent donor base, and so we are able to cover our costs because of the general public being interested in receiving unbiased, truthful, as well as very candid reviews and assessments on what's going on in government. There are too many organizations out there because of large donors or government funding streams that are not willing to go places that we're willing to go in terms of shining a light. And that support is crucial to have that small dollar grassroots support base throughout the country, and with many of our programs concentrated in California. Now, the foundation is a national foundation, but we do have a number of projects that are focused on California because, frankly, California is the worst governed state in the country. And they've got competition, no doubt, but they are the worst governed state in the country. And we believe that our foundation's focus should remain here. We have about 6 programs that are standing programs, each with projects underneath them. We have Open Government Institute, designed to help people understand their rights under the Freedom of Information Act, as well as Public Records Act laws that are in place around the country. So we'll provide technical assistance for members of the public and organizations who are seeking government documents and government records as part of their efforts to hold these agencies accountable. We also have the Government Performance Initiative, which looks at the impact or the results of government programs, and where programs are not working, we flag that and we explain that there's waste and that programs are not achieving desired outcomes. We have our Center for Public Finance Transparency. This looks at where the money in government is going, as well as financial risks that the public, investors, and taxpayers may bear because of government mismanagement of its finances or regulatory markets. And so when we look at, for example, the utility rates in California, we're absolutely looking at public finance, and that is, how are these rates developed? How are they charging individuals for utility, electric and gas utilities? So the Center for Public Finance Transparency took the lead on that report recently, and uncovered where the funding flows are going. Conflict Watch looks at elected officials and government officials to see if they have a conflict of interest and whether they're violating ethics laws. Center for Civic Engagement is designed to get more people involved in the process of holding government accountable. And so we have a number of training programs to get members of the public engaged in participating in these processes. Part of our Center for Civic Engagement also focuses on students, both high school and college conservative and moderate students who we're trying to support and train and activate in the cause of government accountability. We have the California Emerging Leaders Program that is housed under that center. And finally, we have the Confidence in Democracy Initiative. We're shining a light on how elections are conducted. And again, California has the worst system for elections in the country. And that's why we're spending so much time shining a light on the failures of California as it relates to how it manages its elections. So that's a little bit about the foundation. Let's dive into today's content about becoming a citizen watchdog in your community, how you can do that. The foundation of being a citizen watchdog is to find out what your government is actually doing. And a lot of times the government will not tell you what they're doing. You've got to go demand records and figure it out. Fortunately, taxpayers have powerful rights to government information. At the federal level, we have the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA. At state and local government here in California, we have the California Public Records Act, CPRA. So when people use the word FOIA, oh, I put a FOIA request in, or a PRA, they are talking about the laws, but I've heard people use these terms interchangeably, and that's fine. The bills, however, the laws themselves are named something different at each level of government. But the principle behind these bills, it is the same. And that is, if government has a record, the public has a right to have a copy of the record or to examine the record. Now, that means we have to figure out what is the definition under the law of what a government document or record. What is that definition? Well, it's anything already written. Okay, so that could be a report, an email. Lots can be found out just by demanding emails of government officials and reading them one by one by one. Text messages, a spreadsheet, financial records, a check, a contract, a grant. All of these are considered government documents. And people might ask me, well, these politicians are clever. And so what they're doing is they're not using a government email address. They're using their personal cell phone. And that is correct. Politicians and people doing bad things are routinely having conversations on non-government devices because they know that those devices are not uploaded or backed up to the cloud, to storage systems. Well, it doesn't matter whether the document was written on a government computer or a personal computer. It doesn't matter whether the politician used their private cell phone or a government cell phone. Any item they write that relates to government business is considered a government document. And the problem is that these politicians will just simply say, oh, I have no documents of this. So it really is a system with flaws in terms of the accountability, because you will have politicians think that they're clever and they'll say, well, I don't have any documents related to that request, because they think, well, it's on my private cell phone. No one's ever going to figure out. And that's, again, the flaw of these laws. It means that you have to be even more aggressive in trying to obtain copies of documents from multiple sources, because guess what? When a politician sends an email or a text message using a non-governmental device, they may think they're clever, that they don't have to produce it, when in fact the law says they do. But there's probably another government staffer on that email on a government server or that text message. And maybe they also, that other government staffer may be more honest than this politician, and they may produce that document. So we have in the past been very careful. When we want a record from a specific politician, sometimes we go and we do PRAs to a multitude of politicians in their network to find out what documents they have. And guess what? If we find a politician says, here are all the documents, I have nothing more to offer, and then we find another document from another politician, we sue their ass. We show that we are looking from multiple angles for the documents and that you did not comply with the law, and we are now going to file a lawsuit. And we're going to ask a judge to order the politician under punishment of the court to produce the documents. And maybe, since this person has not complied, appoint a special master to go in and get the documents. So again, the public records laws are flawed in that we are relying on government actors who may be doing something illegal or something wrong to be compliant just based on their word. So we have to have an approach to looking at these documents in a multitude of ways. Can the government deny you documents? No. In most cases, they cannot deny you, but they will try. They will ignore you. Then they will also say, "Oh, we don't have the documents," or "This is too broad." We'll talk about how you deal with that in a moment. But under the law, the government cannot withhold the document from you. There are a couple exceptions I want to cover real quick. Next slide. There are laws that protect the documents relating to HR or personnel records. So if something is private or of a confidential nature through the HR department, deals with personnel issues, you're not entitled to that record. If someone walks in and says, "I want to see the healthcare invoices for all your employees," under HIPAA, that would not be permissible. It's a federal law that says that this is private information. So anything deemed to be private is appropriate for the government to deny you the record. Top secret information at the federal level, obviously, is deniable. Information that is not yet official. They call it pre-decisional work product. And so they say that the document does not exist because we haven't issued our report yet. In some cases, the courts have allowed a government agency to withhold documents for a project that has yet to be produced. But in most cases, and that's usually at the federal level, in the state courts, they've said, no, your emails in the middle of a project are not somehow shielded from a Public Records Act request because you haven't issued the report yet. Government then would have an incentive never to issue reports. So if the record has been written, then the email or the record shall be produced. So when they say that they're not giving you a record, you have a right to know why was the record withheld. They have to tell you that we withheld records and here's why. And then, of course, you can go back and forth, litigate, argue, and dispute. Governments that have been destroyed or deleted are no longer records under the eyes of the law. And this is why record retention policies in your local government agency are crucial. We've seen the city of San Diego, the county of San Diego. We've seen school districts decide, well, we're going to delete emails after 30 days. This is absolutely absurd because a 30-day email deletion policy serves no purpose to save server space. I mean, because it's not that expensive to archive. And it will end up depriving the public of the right to know when a scandal happens. We won't know who was involved in it because we only can see the last 30 days of culprits versus where did the scandal begin. So we are very interested at the Transparency Foundation in flagging weak record retention policies, and you should too. Government cannot charge you for compiling or collecting records. So if it takes them 5 weeks to scour their emails and then flag up every email that contains the word mileage tax, that cost is simply the cost of doing business in California. They can, however, charge you for a physical copy of the document, which is why I always say I'm not interested in physical copies of your documents. Just send it to me in an Excel spreadsheet or a PDF or a digital file. So digital records or electronic format records, they're not allowed to charge you for. They can only charge you for Xeroxing or copy expenses. So what if a government agency refuses? Well, first, many of them will ignore your request. So I always set a timer on my calendar to just simply repeat the request and email people saying, "Hey, it's been 30 days. Where are you with my public records request?" Do not back down. Do not let them bully you. They will bully you. They default to, sorry, don't know what you're talking about. Sorry, we don't have these records. Sorry, your request is overly broad. Do not back down. Assert your right to the records. Say, I disagree with your determination. I demand that you comply. And if necessary, hire a lawyer. Now, your legal fees are paid when you prevail, but make sure if you decide to go forward with a lawyer that you force your lawyer to review the situation first and give you an opinion on your probability of success. And make sure the lawyer takes the case on contingency. Because that lawyer, if they've got a good PRA case, they're going to make their money forcing the government to comply. But you shouldn't be out the money giving them this opportunity. Sorry, lawyers. That's just the way the cookies crumbles. Next slide. Now, here are some tips for how to make a public records request. You need to use a template letter because we do have a template letter that allows you to assert your legal rights, preserve your legal rights, and then insert in the middle of the letter the document that, or documents or topics that you're wanting documents and records for. Be as specific as possible. This will help you in the government. I don't want all of you wasting the time of a government agency going out there and collecting records. I'm a fiscal conservative. I don't want to see that. So please think about how can you narrow your request for documents down. Again, this will also help you in the usual complaint or default of the government agency when they say, sorry, your request is overly broad, and we have a right to reject overly broad requests. By the way, the courts have said that that's not actually an excuse. They can't say no because it's overly broad, but that is typically what some of these bureaucrats will do. So the more specific you are, the better your request will be. If you already know that a document exists, specify that record. So sometimes I'll ask specifically for a contract number or all documents about this topic between the government agency and this individual or the employees at this organization. Make sure you ask for all records, emails, backup documents, texts, financial records, because if you don't specifically ask for it, they're not going to give it to you. Provide date ranges. That's so important because if you can narrow down the dates, it also narrows down the type of document that you're or the request that you're making. Who do you send it to? Now, most agencies have a PRA, a Public Records Act request coordinator. Typically, it's in the general counsel's office. So I always find the PRA person and then CC the general counsel or lawyer for the agency. Also, put program staff on. If you know that you're trying to get COVID information, then put the public health the public health officer on. Put the communications director for the public health agency on. Put a couple program staff on, because once they get a PRA, they know they have to forward it to the right person to coordinate. Work with the agency. Don't be bullied, but also don't be a bully. When they get back to you and say, thank you for your request, we're working on it, can we have a call because we do want to narrow this down to see if we can understand your request better. Don't assume that they're up to no good. So give it a good faith effort. Sit down with them, do a phone call, and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. All right. This is why I'm asking for the record. Now, you don't have to tell them why you're asking for the record. There's no requirement that you tell people why. But if you tell them why, the agency may have a genuinely good idea on how to get you the information you're seeking. Next slide. Here is a copy of a letter that we typically use, a template. The yellow is boilerplate. The blue is the time period that we are specifying, and the green is a description of the type of records that we're looking for. So I am requesting access to records in possession or control of the County of San Diego for the purposes of inspection and copying pursuant to CPRA, Government Code Section 6250, Article 1 of the California State Constitution. So this is basically saying, hey, this is a PRA. I'm citing my legal rights. I am requesting an opportunity to inspect or obtain copies of public records and any electronic communications from staff that include information on the following topics. Okay, and this is where you're narrowing down your requests. For the period of July 1, 2021 and October 2022, 2021. So that's a pretty narrow period of time. Then in the green section, here are the documents. Please provide any and all records, emails, correspondence, or data regarding reports and complaints of voters arriving at polling stations and being told they've already voted. Next section. Please provide any records and all records, emails, no, back up. Correspondence and data regarding signatures on envelopes containing ballots that were initially rejected. Signatures initially rejected on envelopes containing ballots that were cured. Now notice I'm skipping over the headline queries because the headline query is kind of telling them what I'm looking for in terms of the topic, but I'm really having to specify with these subparagraphs the specific record that I consider to be responsive to that query. So what we're looking at are claims on ballots already cast by voters, signature verification and rejection processes, and erroneous ballot issues. Those are the three topics that I'm interested in knowing about government records and that I'm researching. But then I specify what I'm looking record-wise for from the agency. So under item 3, erroneous ballot issues, it says, please provide any and all records, emails, correspondence, or data regarding individuals who reported to your office that they had experienced any of the following issues. Received a duplicate ballot, received ballots of a person no longer living at the address, received ballots of a person never at the address, received ballot of a dead person, received a ballot at their address in another state, but informed your office they no longer reside in California. And so for this request, we actually did talk to the office at the county. And we kind of explained verbally, here's what we're doing. Here's how, the research we're doing. Can you send us this information? And this is certainly something that was helpful to them, helpful to us. Next slide. Now, this slide contains the remainder of the letter. The remainder of the letter is boilerplate. It cites all the codes. And let me tell you some of the things that you get to tell them. Quote, if you contend that any portion of the records requested is exempt from disclosure by express provisions of law, Government Code 62053A requires that you segregate and redact that material in order that the remainder of the records may be released. If you contend that any express provision of law exists to exempt from disclosure all or a portion of the records that I have requested, Government Code Section 6253C requires that you notify me in writing of the reasons for the determination, not later than 10 days from your receipt of this request. Government Code Section 6253D and 6255B require further that any response to this request that includes a determination that the request is denied in whole or part must be in writing and include the name and title of the persons who made the determination for the response. Government Code Section 6253D prohibits use of this 10-day period or any provisions of CPRA or any other law to delay access for purposes of inspecting public records. Okay, so then we go to the blue area, because this is my way of offering to help. All right, so we start out demanding that this is a PRA or insisting that this is a PRA, giving them a date range, telling them the records we want. Then we go on and we give this yellow period, yellow section of all the code that they have to rely on. by the way, they know what they have to comply with. But sometimes you legitimately get someone who has never had a PRA before, and they need to see this language so they realize, oh, okay, this person like is asking for something and the law tells us we have to do it. I better give this to my supervisor so that they can look at it and respond. So here's the the blue section that we bold and italicize so that they know, hey, we're willing to work with you. It says, as we would like to work with your office to make our research request into these issues as easy as possible for you and your staff. If I can provide any clarification that will help you expedite your attention to my request, please contact me. So in other words, we're saying, hey, we don't want to be mean about this. If you want to talk about what we're seeking, and maybe there's a way that that we're not seeking the right records, or we could do something easily, more easily if we narrow it, let us know. We are absolutely happy to talk to you about this. Now, the final section is so important because some government agencies are nasty about it, and they say, oh, you didn't tell us that you didn't want to spend money, so we have a bill for $6,500 because we copied all of this. Now, we did say electronic records, in electronic format. So this is what we say. I ask that you notify me of any duplication costs exceeding $150 before you duplicate records so that I can decide which records I want copied. Thank you for your timely attention. So this protects you against like a blank check, and I've seen that happen before. Okay, next slide. Follow the money investigations. So this is a type of investigation we would like each of our citizen activists to engage in. And sometimes you don't have to write a report. You just get enough information from an agency and you hand it over to a trusted member of the media, which I know that's like finding a $3 bill. Most members of the media are not trusted whatsoever. They are working for government. They are cheerleaders of the corruption in government. They cover things up. So sometimes what you do is you collect information and then you share it with a watchdog group like the Transparency Foundation, and we can then advise you on your next steps. But one of the things we're urging our watchdogs around the state to do is to follow the money. And this is where you need to look at what groups in your area are politically active. Google election, Contra Costa County, election, Alameda, election, Fresno. Find out which groups are out there doing press conferences, what groups are lobbying before city council and county board, what groups are showing up to campaign rallies. Look at what groups are politically active and find out, are they receiving any contracts or grants? So I reverse engineer it. I don't say, oh, give me all your contracts and grants and let me look. Although you can do that, it takes a long time. Instead, what we do is we look at groups that are engaged in politics, and we want to make sure that none of them are getting government money because we don't think it's appropriate for any political group, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, to get taxpayer money while you're engaging in lobbying or political activities. If they do have a contract, then you have to dig deep. Does the contract have a deliverable? And if so, what is it? And what are the rates that the group is charging government? How much money are they getting to do that work? Is that fair market value? Is it appropriate? What campaign contributors are receiving contracts and project approvals? If so, let me see their emails. So you look at big contributors and financial backers to politicians on both sides of the aisle, and then you say, I want emails between the city council and any company associated with this development project. And you list companies. You can do some research as the types of companies. Who's their lobbyist? They have to file forms as to who lobbies for these projects. We have a case study for you. Follow the Money, San Diego County. It's at our website, thetransparencyfoundation.org. And it kind of walks you through the sort of things that we found by simply asking these questions in San Diego, which was over $6 million in taxpayer money going to left-wing political groups while they were engaging in politics, while they were lobbying the very same people giving them money. You want to talk about a conflict of interest? There you go. Next slide. We would also like our watchdogs to look at wasteful spending. And this is a broader category of not just looking at political groups and lobbying groups that are getting money, but look at the programs of government. How much money are we spending on roads? How much are we spending on libraries? How much are we spending on drag queen bingo or story time? What are you spending your money on? How much did you spend on drag queen story time? We found in San Diego with those political groups, we found a lot of wasteful spending there, including the gay center, the LGBT center, was given $20,000 by the county of taxpayer money to buy transgender binders and tuckers. Binders, and by the way, binders are not talking about, the 3-ring binders. No, something much more weird than that. And so I would consider that wasteful spending, using our taxpayer money for that stuff. So what is government spending money on? And so the question, we have a three-pronged test to determine wasteful. Number one is the mission test. Does the expenditure of this money reflect the core mission of the agency? If it doesn't, why in the hell is the government spending money on this when it's failing at its core mission? Also, does it duplicate other agencies that should be doing the work here? So the mission test is not just about, is it duplicative? Or I'm sorry, is it wasteful because it's not the core mission of a government agency? But we also look at, does it duplicate the other agencies that should be working on this issue? Appropriateness. Is it appropriate for government to pay for this? Is it appropriate for government to buy underwear, tuckers for transgender individuals? I don't think so. Particularly when you can't fill potholes. So appropriate. Is it appropriate to do this? And then a third is if you've achieved the first two standards of yes, it's in the mission and yes, it's appropriate. Well, what if it's wasteful from the standpoint of it's too expensive? They're very inefficient. So that's where we look at cost per unit. And this is where you can look at what other government agencies are providing. The wonderful thing about government is that there's so many agencies. It's also the bad thing. So how much does it cost per pothole to fill in this city versus another city? How much does it cost per pupil educated in this district versus another district? So you can do a lot of cost per unit analysis. And you can also look at the cost increase over a period of time. We found a transportation agency that was charging or spending $9 million per mile of bike lane that they were installing. Hell, I'm going to get in the bike lane installation business. $9 million? Woo. So cost comparisons are very useful. Next slide. Conflicts of interest. Question here is, are the politicians and government officials running these agencies inappropriately benefiting from their positions? And there are a couple things that you have at your disposal to understand that. First, under California state law, every member of a government board, every senior executive in government must file what we call a Form 700. And that form is listed online for every official. It is a statement of economic interests. Form 700 FPPC is what you would search for. And that means that you would be able to know what they and their spouse, unless they have a prenuptial agreement, what they and their spouse receive in terms of income, what investments they hold, so what properties they own. So if you have a city council member voting on a project that is literally down the street from their home or a property that they own, they would be conflicted if it could be in any way, shape, be argued that they would benefit financially from the project, or be hurt by the project. It doesn't just have to be a benefit. If they're hurt by it, and they participate in voting no, it also could be considered depriving the public of honest services. So Form 700s give you an opportunity to look at the financial holdings, the economic interests of a government official. Government Code 1090 prohibits a executive branch or legislative branch official from participating in any way in a decision or a government action that may conflict or influence their financial position or that of a family member. And so when they say participate, it means you can't work on the project, you can't speak about the project, you cannot vote on the project. So it is very clear, Government Code 1090, the do's and the don'ts. Again, I urge you to check out the Fair Political Practices Commission website, fppc.ca.gov, for more details. There are similar documents at the federal level. Candidates for Congress file statements of economic interest as well. The clerk of the House of Representatives has a website with all of those forms on there. Investigate. A lot of conflicts of interest are never seen just on the forms. In fact, a lot of times we find a politician didn't list something they own on their form, and then we file the complaint against them for that. And so what I always do is I approach it two different ways. Number one, if a politician is engaging in suspicious activity, if they're voting in a way that you're like, wow, why did they do that? Then maybe we kick the tires and find out a little bit more. Also, use internet research and talk to people that know the politician and find out whether there's a connection of dots. What are the relationships there between that politician and their staff? Don't forget staff, the politician and their staff, and business before the city or family members. And so connecting the dots to family or the individual for current or future work. Next slide. Whistleblower protection. Back up, please. Whistleblower protection. You, as a watchdog, are a member of the public. If you talk to government officials and they send you information, and a lot of the stuff we get at Transparency Foundation, we get from government officials. In fact, that Follow the Money report came from a tip of a government official. You have a moral obligation to keep whistleblowers safe. And you keep them safe by judiciously, zealously guarding their identity. It is not your right to reveal that they gave you information. And you have no obligation. If anyone ever asks you, it's none of their business. The only time that you should even consider revealing a source is if a judge orders you and on the advice of your counsel, they say that it's appropriate. Otherwise, you keep your mouth shut. You are a sponge. You absorb, you do not give away. And so when people say, well, I'll never say who my source is, it is vital that before you use any record, before you reveal any information publicly, that you verify or source the information in a manner that is independent from your whistleblower. And you've got to really think through this, because if you reveal information that only the whistleblower would have known, then you need to ask permission of the whistleblower to do that. And you need to advise them that your identity might come out. Is that okay? Can I use this information? Because I have not been able to confirm that someone else knew about it, or that I could find out about it in another way. And so what I always do for my whistleblowers is, I always keep them confidential, unless they tell me, hey, yeah, use my name. But even then, I don't like using their name, because it's like, I don't want to, even if they're willing, why give them that grief? So if you cannot replicate the source of the information, then perhaps you don't use it. Or if the whistleblower absolutely says, I'm okay with it, then that's fine. By the way, I always like replicating information, because I like to check my sources. I like to know that what the whistleblower told me is correct. Now, state law protects whistleblowers. The California Whistleblower Protection Act protects every state and local government employee who files a complaint from suffering any retaliation by their employer, their government employer, on the basis of making the complaint. The law forbids any retaliation, and that includes intimidation, denial of appointment or promotion, threat of adverse action, poor performance evaluations, involuntary transfer, or any form of disciplinary action. Now, yes, whistleblowers are protected, but these liars, cheats, and thieves in government, they will do things with a smile on their face and still hurt whistleblowers. So we have to be careful. Next slide. Some helpful resources. There are local groups that have websites that aggregate data. Open Secrets, by the way, is a database in Washington, D.C. that has campaign contributor information. The FPPC, Secretary of State website, the clerk's office, the county board's office, they also have documents of campaign contributors on their websites. So there's a lot of government databases that you can search. Even the state of California has a website for contracts and grants from the state of California that it's clunky, but it's aggregated. But one of the best websites is maintained by the California Policy Center. It's called transparentcalifornia.org. And it includes salaries and benefits for every state and local government employee. And you can have so much fun. If you want to really get angry or get your friends angry, show them the salaries and pensions of government employees in California. This stuff is just crazy. So you can search on transparentcalifornia.org by name, position, or government agency, and you can go year to year and see the salaries and benefits. If you need advice or help, we're always happy to help. You can email us at info@thetransparencyfoundation.org or go to our website and type it into the contact form on the website. When you contact us, please understand a few things. We help those that help themselves. Don't come to us and say, you ought to do an audit of my school district. Hey, Captain Obvious, we'd love to audit every school district. Tell us what you're seeing. Help us out. Don't come to us with a demand. Come to us with, hey, I would like to do this. Can you point me in the right direction? Can you give me some tips? So we help those that help themselves because we do have limited resources. And so when you contact us, please let us know the nature of the query that you're trying to make. Be as specific as possible with your question, and we'll try to either answer that or connect you with someone who does know the answer. With that, please check out our website, thetransparencyfoundation.org, where you'll find a number of additional resources and stories and reports. If you want to ask a question, go to the next slide. Just hit *9 on your phone or raise your hand in the Zoom application, and Dylan will call on you. Unmute yourself when we ask you to speak. So I'll take the questions in the chat box first while Dylan looks at people raising hands in Zoom. Lee Skinner says, not so much a question, but information for the public who are logged in. Donation to the Transparency Foundations are tax deductible, which makes it easier to donate to them. Thank you, Lee. Yes, we are a tax deductible organization. And we send out our tax deductible letters at the end of each year for people to deduct on taxes. David Lorenzo says, not a question, but a thought. Illinois has a better government association. It was started by well-known investigative journalists. They do similar work that you're doing. I know that California's media is very liberal, but you might want to think about recruiting a well-known broadcast journalist as part of your effort. We would love to bring on investigative journalists who actually are journalists. The sad thing is that in California, we do not have an independent media. They are all activists. And so they are not going to hold the government accountable. But yes, we are looking for paid and unpaid resources and talent going forward. David says, would Jennifer Siebel Newsom's California Partners Project be an example of something to look into regarding FOIA? Yes, for a PRA. It's a state project. not only SVB banking crisis, but also her woke attempts at indoctrinating students throughout the country, funded partially by government grants. Yes, there is a government grant that she receives, government contracts from school districts. So what you can do there is you can request documents regarding her project from school districts or the state of California and see what sort of conversations are being had. In addition, politicians who solicit money for nonprofits, like Jennifer Siebel Newsom's nonprofit, they have to make a behested payment disclosure. So Governor Gavin Newsom has actually raised money for his wife's nonprofit, and he's had to disclose that through something called the behested payment disclosure. And those documents are available online as well. James says, is the website going to be available? Yes, the website, this slide deck will be available. We will be posting a story on the transparencyfoundation.org website today with these slides, with the video as well. We have a question for Mike. Mike raised his hand. And so, Dylan, do you want to call on Mike? Mike Wood? Mike, go ahead and unmute yourself. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Carl. I deal with a lot of local people here in La Mesa, and if I could get copies of the slides, I would love to sit with them for a few minutes. I don't think that they'd go to the website and take your presentation. So I'd like to bring this message to them because I think they can contribute, and I think they want to.
Okay, Dylan, why don't we have a follow-up email sent out with both the link to the story as well as a PDF version of the slides?
That would be perfect. Thank you.
We can do that.
Thank you. We do have to continue to build our support network. So I encourage you, if you want to support this work, please email the slides and the story that will be posted on our site about today's presentation. Email that to your friends and say, look, if we don't support investigative journalism on the center right in California, we're never going to get the truth. And I can guarantee you the media will not dig deep on what's going on. Well, I appreciate your time today. We will be posting this material and emailing it out. In conclusion, I'll just let you know that this week is something called Sunshine Week. Once a year during March, there is a Sunshine Week that's held nationally. And it's one of the reasons why we chose this week to hold this presentation. And that's designed to encourage the watchdogs in every community to learn about their rights under sunshine laws, Public Records Act laws, and to exercise those rights throughout the year to hold government accountable. And I certainly hope that you will help us do that. Thank you so much.